All right. Thank you for joining today. We can get started with this webinar on the journey to trusted access. My name is Mignon Wagner and I work in product marketing here at Jamf, and I'm excited to present trusted access today because really no matter how big your organization is or what industry you're in, where you are in your journey to manage and secure Apple devices, you'll be able to take insights and actionable next steps away from today's webinar and really implement it at your organization. If you think any of your colleagues could also benefit from today's content, you can share the recording with them, which we'll send you right after the live webinar. Quick agenda. First, we'll review some of the challenges that IT and security teams are facing today and review some considerations for a modern strategy that really unifies management and security. We will then walk through what trusted access is with a special focus on threats to the Apple ecosystem and how you can adapt trusted access for your environment to effectively strengthen your security posture over time with a clear goal and kind of end state in mind. So essentially, how you can implement this idea of trusted access no matter where you are at in your journey. Just before we get started, we will have a very quick introduction into Jamf. If you don't know us already, we have over 21 years of experience supporting and innovating with Apple. More than 72,500 organizations rely on Jamf to manage over 30 million devices. And this includes really companies of all sizes, but also schools, universities, healthcare providers, and that all around the world. Our mission is to simplify work by managing and securing Apple. And that creates an Apple experience that users love and organizations trust. And that is essentially the heart of trusted access. To get started, let's look at some of the challenges that we hear our customers are facing today. Some of the challenges are, for example, providing ready-to-go work devices. This is typically what people come to us first. Deploying devices and making sure they have everything that the end users need to get started and be productive on day one. But then there's all these additional things such as creating and managing cloud identities, keeping everything up to date, responding to IT tickets, monitoring device health, controlling access to company apps and data, identifying threats, and then of course responding to them, protecting endpoints, remediating in case of a breach, educating employees, kind of the first line of defense, reporting, securing company networks, meet compliance benchmarks and regulation, ongoing patch management, keeping up with the latest cybersecurity trends, and now on top of all of that, and this is by no means even an exhaustive list of everything that we've seen, doing more with less and cutting costs, all while scaling with a company that is still growing, innovating, and optimizing all at the same time, and creating a technology experience for those end users that encourages them to be productive. So really quite a few things, as we can see. And really organizations need to not just keep up with end user support and kind of meeting just the basic requirements, but they're also under pressure to create this kind of secure hybrid work environment that protects data, which is a very hefty ask, but what can enable IT and security teams to do all of this effectively is having the right tools in the toolbox. And the right tools are the ones that can effectively perform the needed tasks, but that also play well together. So apart from the growing number of kind of imminent tasks and challenges, there's also market trends that really should inform any security strategy so that it serves you not just now, but also in future. We recently commissioned a study that showed that 62% of users prefer using Apple at work and 89% would even make a salary sacrifice to choose their work device. And so this trend is really reflected in the market share growth for PC and Mac as well. So it's been declining for over a decade, but just having a look at the past 3 years, we can see that PCs have only grown by 6%, while the market share for Mac is tenfold. So in other words, users like to choose their device for work. They have a strong preference for Apple in the workplace, and we can only expect this to grow in future, which means that IT and security teams really need to work together to support all of these users. So what does this mean for your security strategy? So we know that there is no kind of step-by-step recipe that will work for every business. And there are lots of factors that play into what the right strategy is for you, such as what devices your employees use, Is it really just Macs, or do they also use phones to access company data? If they do, are those really just corporate phones, or do they realistically also use their privately owned devices to access corporate data? And if so, how is that secured? What industry are you in? What kind of existing tools and workflows do you have in place, and so on? But really, the most important considerations, given all of these challenges and all of these trends that we just reviewed, is that we need a security strategy that is integrated with management. And there's a few reasons for this. First, security is built for a declining ecosystem, which means that really nearly all security providers right now focus on Windows first and then Mac and mobile second and third. But both Mac and mobile are the kind of enterprise ecosystems of the future, as we just saw, while Windows has been declining and has been doing so for over a decade. And so migrating security solutions from Windows to Mac and mobile now leaves a substantial gap in capabilities because the infrastructure between those platforms is just too different, and you're left with securing the kind of lowest common denominator, the shared element between those platforms, which is not good enough. It wasn't good enough to begin with, but especially today, the threat landscape, we're seeing so many new kinds of attacks and they're maturing so quickly that there's a big gap and there's lots that can kind of fall through the cracks. Then security is usually provided by a team and platform that is separate from IT, often at odds with each other. Management and security teams kind of use products that do not play well together, that are unable to really take advantage of all the real-time data and capabilities that you would have if you had a single platform that combined management and security. Then you also have to consider cost. Of course, this is something that we're seeing a lot, that IT and security teams are both under pressure to consolidate vendors and really re-examine their existing tech stack to see if there's any consolidation that could happen. Because essentially what happened over a long time was that if you purchase device management, endpoint security, maybe a VPN or a ZTNA solution from different providers, then that requires substantial upfront investment. It also requires budget for the actual implementation, and then over time, and this is really where the cost killer. All of these systems have to work together, and kind of forcing them to play well together requires quite a bit of labor. And then if there is a gap between them, if they just can't be integrated well enough, then of course, in the case of a security breach, that is kind of the greatest cost of all. So having security and IT teams and their tools be separate and not access the same real-time data and not have one platform, one place for visibility and for response is really where you're giving so much opportunity for bad actors to infiltrate your company. And they have an increasing attack surface to target. They can attack any kind of IT asset that is connected to the internet. So any app, any IoT device, any cloud platform, and so on, can be infiltrated and exploited, for example, through an external network vulnerability to then perpetuate that attack. So by implementing management-led security, you're covering more of that attack surface because both sides work together and can protect your assets better. And so we at Jamf are seeing these issues with today's security programs, and we created a combination of management and security, kind of a new vision of what commercial security should actually look like. And our platform allows organizations to achieve trusted access. So this is really a combination and also the connection of device management, identity and access workflows, as well as endpoint security. The outcome that trusted access achieves is that only authorized users on enrolled devices that are secure and compliant can access sensitive data. Although this sounds like a zero trust initiative that you may have heard elsewhere, it is something that is unique to Jamf in that it provides a kind of roadmap to implement an experience that is very user-friendly for your end users, that promotes productivity through kind of uninterrupted workflows, and that can be trusted by IT and security at the same time. So we will very briefly just explore each of these 6 elements that contribute to trusted access, starting with enrolled devices. So enrolled devices are a critical foundation for achieving trusted access because we have to have visibility into every device that is being used for work. Apple Business Manager enables 2 enrollment workflows that organizations can use. So either for corporate-owned devices, there's automated enrollment. This happens automatically the first time that the device is turned on. And from then on, IT has full control over those endpoints and for the entire life cycle of the device. So that is one option. For BYOD devices, there's account-driven user enrollment. So this is where the employee can initiate privacy-protecting BYOD enrollment on their personal device so that IT still has control over company data, but they do not have visibility into things that they shouldn't, such as personal information like messages, photos, apps, and so on. And so this really is the foundation of trusted access, is having everything enrolled and just kind of under control. Next, verifying each user's identity. So Jamf integrates with every major cloud identity provider to provision local accounts with the user's cloud identity, but then creates a streamlined onboarding experience. So verified identity also means that the user's password stays in sync with their cloud identity. That is more secure, but it also minimizes IT tickets and kind of employee downtime. So having these users' cloud identities now bound to their device is important because you're able to utilize your existing cloud identity solution, but also have granular control over access and permissions. Now, Apple makes some of the most secure hardware and software in the world. You probably know that, but we do want to make sure that we have additional layers of security so that every endpoint that is being used for work is also protected. A little bit of background on that and why Apple specific security is so important to us. Now, we just spoke about the growing Mac market share, which means that it's also being adopted in the enterprise more. But this means that Apple devices are increasingly being targeted by bad actors. And these are very early to act. We see they are fast to respond, and they really have a growing incentive to invest more resources to develop sophisticated attacks to infiltrate companies. And most security tools, as you probably know, are primarily built for Windows, and then they are expanded to support Mac. And so they really lack the focus on both known, but especially on novel threats to the Apple ecosystem. And so this is where Mac malware goes unnoticed. In fact, just over 40% of macOS malware samples that our threat intelligence team researched over the course of the year could be identified by a VirusTotal hosted security solution. So that's a lot of malware that is going unnoticed because the tools that are being used to find them are just not focused on Apple. And so this is why an Apple first approach really is what your Apple fleet needs, because only this focus will produce the Apple first and Apple best threat intelligence that you need to detect all malicious activity on your Apple devices. So a little bit of background, our threat and research team, Jamf Threat Labs, is comprised of experienced threat researchers, cybersecurity experts, data scientists, and they have skills that span from penetration testing to network monitoring, malware research, app risk assessment, and so on. And they perform this continuous research that we then use for our own security solutions. And over the past half year, they found that almost 40% of macOS threats that they detected were not known to VirusTotal. And almost 30% of the known threats were not detected as malicious by other security vendors, meaning that if you put that together, over half of macOS threats would remain undetected and unknown to the public if you use common security tools, if you don't use tools that are specific to the Apple ecosystem. Now, if you're interested, some of their findings can be found on our Jamf blog, and you'll also see, if you follow that several Apple OS CVE discoveries are being attributed to this threat intelligence team to Jamf Threat Labs. Plugged into our machine learning engine Miriam, we can now embrace Apple's management and security frameworks, including the endpoint security API, and all that data to truly be able to audit the security on your Apple endpoints. So for example, we can deploy secure baselines and auditing security benchmarks, including things such as file vault. We can also monitor endpoints for threats to automatically block and quarantine malware, keeping your endpoints protected and your data safe. Now that we've hardened our endpoints, backed by Apple-specific threat research, we've already taken a very big and important step in our trusted access journey, but we can't quite lean back yet because we still need to consider an important weak link in our security posture, and that is, of course, our end users. Jamf Threat Labs found that 1 in 3 organizations had at least one user fall victim to a phishing attack, which one user, that's all it takes. And they caught over 122,000 zero-day attacks. It's also been found to be the second most common attack vector, leading to a security breach during the past year. So what we learned from this is that really phishing is something that that affects all organizations, that there is an incredible amount of phishing attacks that are happening, and that end users don't seem to be particularly good at spotting them or avoiding them. So when we're talking about preventing threats, again, it's very important that we talk about all devices here, because both Mac and mobile devices have access to that sensitive company data, so why would we only protect one? So very important that we do this across both, and that it's really a device-wide protection as well, that it happens for apps, but also for web sessions and so on. Jamf provides a simple security awareness notification that end users can see through a dedicated end user app that then help them learn how to work smarter and safer. This is very important for us, that we provide something that is not just useful for security teams, but also something that trains end users and really creates a work culture that is more aware of cybersecurity. The next element in trusted access is zero trust access. This ensures users have access to work resources with continuous device security monitoring, which adjusts the access in real time if a risk on that device is identified. And again, this works for both corporate-owned and privately owned devices, on mobile devices and on Mac devices, to establish a secure connection regardless of where users are. So we're covering the full attack surface. Last but definitely not least, we need automations and remediation features in place so that even if there should be a security breach, we can quickly respond and limit the spread. These remediation steps include things such as suspending a user's access, updating an operating system or maybe a vulnerable app, or say you want to notify the user as well. And so this is really where management-led security and having a strategy that combines both becomes so evident again, because they're all device management functions and automation tools, but with very important security implications. And device management side of it and the endpoint security side of it, they should all be speaking together. So here we are. We've come full circle. We've covered the management and security layers that provide a work experience where only authorized users on enrolled devices that are secure and compliant can access sensitive data. In summary, trusted access can be achieved with Jamf, a single vendor with integrated capabilities that can replace up to 18 tools. So really a very comprehensive platform that can easily replace something which is currently costing money, but also time and effort to maintain. It offers an Apple first and Apple best experience. It safeguards organizational data wherever it exists, and it fills those security gaps that are currently there because of these different tools and because of the lacking focus on the Apple ecosystem. It also bolsters productivity by preventing interruptions in the end user workflow, and it ensures compatibility and reliability with every new OS release. So we know that zero-day exploits are something that is very serious to the security posture of any organization. And so we've always made sure every single year that the day that a new operating system is released, that we can support that on the same day that it's released. So we know that trusted access is an ideal outcome, and we understand that it's a journey, but how exactly do we get there, or where do we even start? Of course, it's unrealistic to tackle all these elements at once. That would be a little overwhelming and also not very productive. And so we guide new but also existing customers to really view it as a journey where they identify, and we help them identify where in that journey they are, what element of trusted access is a priority for them, and how they can tackle this as a next step. One common step for organizations is to extend their Mac management and security to mobile devices. So we know that users work from anywhere, and we also know that they increasingly use their mobile devices to do so, even if these mobile devices are not provided by a company, but it's their privately owned devices. And so it doesn't make sense that we kind of harden the Macs and we make them meet regulatory and corporate standards and so on, but then we completely ignore and we're blindsided to the mobile devices, because the mobile devices are a gate to corporate data just like the Macs are. And so companies in this situation might choose to focus on endpoint security across all devices, extending that to make sure that really you're safe on all fronts and not just for the Macs. Others want to focus on adding security to their existing device management solution, or perhaps they already have a VPN tool in place or even a zero trust network access solution in place, but they want to protect endpoints and prevent against threats in response to that threat landscape that is maturing and that is increasingly targeting Apple. Others find that implementing or leveraging their existing cloud identity provider is what gives them the greatest benefit, that this is kind of a quick win for them, because it can be dynamically configured for different user groups and how they use apps and company resources to do their job. Others are focusing on the technology experience for those, for example, that are working outside of kind of the company parameter. For those employees that were previously at an office and now they're working in their home office or on the go, but of course, especially for those deskless user groups, those that have always worked outside of the office and that really rely on a safe, constant connection to company apps and to data. So if all of that is still a little bit abstract, then I'm hoping that these examples can illustrate it a little bit better. This first example is Lisa's catering service. Started in her home kitchen, and she really saw a lot of growth during the pandemic, during the past few years. And to keep up with all that demand, she hired 50 employees that work with floating iPads, and they also use their personal iPhones to do things like entering orders into a system, accessing recipes on a shared drive, communicating with clients, with each other, and so on. Now, there have been constant problems with employees locking themselves out of their devices, or they forget the passwords to the apps. And so Lisa realized that she lost control over the devices that she bought over the years, those iPads. And I mean, she never really had control over those personally owned iPhone devices either. And so she hires an IT admin who very quickly became frustrated because he would have to drive to wherever the employee was to help them fix some urgent issue with their device that could bring their entire service to a halt. And so he has great plans for the future to eventually implement identity-based security measures. But for now, a device management solution is the most important first step and has to be implemented to kind of enroll all of those iPad and iPhone devices that are being used for work, no matter whether she bought them or those are the employees, to kind of build that foundation for the future of the company and for the growth that they have ahead of them. This is an example of a larger organization with 1,500 employees that develops medical technology. So Healthy, the name of the company, they have a dedicated IT team that is taking care of the ongoing management of Macs and iPhones. So their devices are enrolled, kind of the first step. the foundation is built. And they do also have Okta in place as a cloud identity solution that they then use to verify identities when any kind of apps or other company resources are being accessed by end users. The CTO recently attended a cybersecurity conference and really noticed how them working with patient information and confidential medical research and so on that is accessed really from anywhere, not just from the office, but also from the lab and outside of that, that they would have to focus on replacing their legacy VPN with the Zero Trust Network Access solution for that continuous safe access to the research and to the patient data, being able to protect that. But also at the same time, they would have to focus on preventing threats, and specifically those phishing attacks that target those deskless researchers that are in the lab that are using their iPhones. For our last fictional example, we have a traffic control department. The city council already has all mobile devices, so these are both iPhones and Android, developed in a unified endpoint management, so a UEM solution. Now, of course, ideally they would have an Apple-specific MDM solution for their iPhones, but currently there's no budget to do so. Regardless, they can still advance in their trusted access journey. They notice that traffic controllers and construction workers are receiving phishing text messages on a regular rate, and they worry that one day a worker might click on a malicious link, which means that it's not just the traffic control department, but maybe also the city council as a whole, or even other state departments that could be affected, and the attack could really spread that way. Jamf can provide that same level of defense against phishing and other threats for the IT team, and at the same time, Jamf Trust, the end user app, can provide that same consistent experience for end users across all device types. So they're preventing against threats on iPhones and on Android devices, regardless of the MDM solution being Apple specific or not, and they know that they can educate their end users on any kind of security behavior.